Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Vantage, D Street's flagship podcast, where we bring conversations with some of the most influential voices shaping the worlds of finance, economics, startups, and much more. Joining us today is Sasha Mirchandani, venture capitalist, serial entrepreneur, founder, and managing partner at Kae Capital, that is one of India's leading early stage venture capital firms. Sir, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you on Vantage. On behalf of everyone at D Street SRCC, we extend our warm regards and truly appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I am Parikshit Sharma and I will be co hosting this podcast alongside Akash Kakkar.
Thanks, guys, for the invite. And like I said earlier, please call me Sasha. Let's do it.
Yeah. So before founding K Capital, Sasha played an instrumental role in shaping India's early startup ecosystem through Mumbai Angels, one of the country's first organized angel investment networks. See, over the years, he has backed and mentored numerous founders across sectors including consumer technology, logistics, health tech, and deep tech. He has also served on the boards of several prominent companies, bringing valuable insight into governance, scaling businesses, and capital allocation across different stages of growth. Sasha, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks again, guys, for the invite.
So, first question being, you transitioned from a corporate leadership role at Merck Electronics, the company behind the Onida brand, to founding Mumbai Angels and later K Capital in 2012. So, what was the biggest financial culture shock you experienced during that shift from the corporate world into early stage investing?
It was a big culture shock in many ways because Onida was at its peak. It was a very large business, it had a very large market cap, large value, brand. And from there, I actually went first to a startup, which was a BPO business. So, as you can imagine, anyone going from a large business to a startup, it's a huge financial culture shock, financially, socially, in every way, form, or shape. You move from working in a very large, fancy office, traveling around, in a business class seat, to suddenly going to barely economy. But I think I was mentally ready for it, and therefore it really didn't affect me at all. Because even while I was working in Onida, what my dad did was he made sure I didn't join the board or any senior position. I was always working in very junior positions, extremely junior. Let's say area sales manager, sales manager. For 2 years, I was a branch manager in the Mangalore branch. So I was never used to any sort of large amount of capital or salary. So the end result was really didn't matter for me to leave Onida and then go into a startup. So that was great, let's say, training by my dad to keep me within his control as far as keeping me real and showing me the real world is tough. You got to start from scratch. Most everybody starts from scratch. Why not me? Just because my father was a founder, what do I have special rights for? And that was a great, let's say, discipline that my dad had to teach us the value of hard work and the value of starting from the beginning. So when I started my BPO business, it didn't matter. It was like I was completely fine.
So back in 2012, how did you convince really the limited partners to bet on the pre-seed stage when the ecosystem was still so nascent in India?
Yeah, I think fair question. It was when I quit, it was super hard to raise capital. I thought it should be quite easy to raise a small fund. But after 6 months, I had no money. So I'm like, my God, I left my fancy job. I was at Nokia Ventures for 6 years, and there was great salary traveling, very comfortably, learning from some of the smartest people. But here I was, and that time I didn't have to raise any money, right? Because I was just investment professional, MD of India. Access to capital was given. I had to put capital into companies. But here I was, in 6 months in, not even a dollar. So I said, okay, there's got to be a different way to do this. I started thinking about it, and I said, okay, how about I approach, let's say, Sequoia Capital, which was at that time and still today is probably the best fund on earth, and ask them if they like to invest. And when I approached them, they were initially skeptical because they said, listen, we don't invest in other startups. We invest in startups, not in other funds. But after prolonged meetings with the heads of Sequoia India, they kind of approved an investment in the fund, but they said you need to first convince Michael Moritz, who was at that point the managing partner of Sequoia. So they set up a meeting with Michael, and at the end of the meeting, Michael said, "I find you to be the right candidate to invest in." And so Sequoia, for the first time ever, they invested in another fund. So when they invested in Kae Capital, I could go to anyone in the world and say, "Look, Sequoia is a LP in K," and that really helped me get oversubscribed actually. So if we wanted to raise $1, we ended up with $3, but we decided to keep the discipline, keep a smaller fund. So the point being, when you get stuck in a bind, there's always a way out. You just have to think differently. So if I thought of this conventional channel of going to regular LPs, I probably would not been able to raise the fund and probably gone back to work at another venture capital fund or back to work in my family business or done whatever. But I believe the opportunity was too big to miss. So I just had to force myself to think out of the box. And I was very lucky that I managed to get this done. Go ahead.
That's a very, very interesting perspective. Sasha, you have also served as managing director at Blue Run Ventures, right? So,
Yeah.
which also gave you exposure to global venture ecosystems. So, I'm just curious, like, what investment practices or perspectives, I would say, from the global markets did you find worked well in India, and which ones did not translate that as effectively?
Well, many worked very well in India, whether it be founder first, whether it be go for large markets, the standard stuff, right? What did not work, Parikshit, was in the Valley, it was possible to fund a company where there was a technocrat CEO, let's say a techie, and he or she did not have the chops to maybe go build a large business, but they had great technology, and we could go find a CEO because the culture of equity was very prevalent in the US, especially in Silicon Valley, and get world class CEOs. Great example is Google, right? They got Eric Schmidt, and the rest is history. If you tell me in India which Eric Schmidt story can you come up with, right? It's hard for you to think of even one. And if I go through many more examples in the value of other Googles. So we realized that you cannot export. In India, it's very different. The founder was the company and is the company even today in 2025, 2026. So that's the one that we could not export. So we had to make sure that if we funded this entrepreneur, he or she had to be able to build a large business on his or her own and not depend on outside help coming in, at least at the CEO level. Obviously, he or she could hire a corp team, a top team with him or her. That's happened thousands of times in India now. But at the CEO level, very hard.
Building upon this only, like, do you think founders in India have also adapted their approach to align better with how investors here evaluate companies, or are they still going with the global practices?
I think founders have evolved quite a bit. Initially, it was very much copy paste. You go with pattern recognition, what worked in the US, work here. But now you see very different businesses come out of India where entrepreneurs are confident that they can build India first businesses. And there are many examples. Our own portfolio company, Zetworks, is a great example of that, right? There was no real copy of that business model anywhere. So the answer is that there are enough and more entrepreneurs who have now come up with different business models and have succeeded. And that success leads to success, and more entrepreneurs will now think out of the box and build businesses.
While going through K Capital, we saw that it is known for remaining sector agnostic. So even as we see many funds today specialize deeply in particular industries, so really from a financial perspective, what is the rationale behind remaining open to investing across sectors rather than focusing narrowly on one domain?
At the early days, the way I look at it, uh, great founders are really the whole point is they don't come labeled by sector, right? They come from exceptional founders solving real problems. That's what we're looking for. And in India, almost every sector is really underpenetrated, as you can imagine. Think about my father's business, Onida, which is a 35-year-old company. Washing machine penetration is like 5% in India. Air conditioner is 8%. And this is not a sector we would invest in because it's capital heavy, but you get the point that a sector like consumer electronics, which is played out in the US decades back, the game has not even started in India. So we don't like to get married to any particular sector because the growth opportunity exists across the board. That's why we're quite excited about any sector. It's more focused on the entrepreneurs for us.
So then, how do you think about portfolio construction and risk diversification across sectors then?
Well, the way we look at it is we obviously make about 30 investments in a fund in the course of a 4 year tenure of the fund. Our business, venture capital business is very simple. It's like a movie business. Let's say you do 10 investments, four will fail, unfortunately. Four will get maybe 2 to 5x returns, which is okay. And one or two will really make the fund. We call it the power law business, right? The home run business. So that's how we think about the construct of a fund. Now, whether we end up with six AI companies or three SaaS companies or two, consumer companies, two gaming companies, that we really don't get too fussed about. We focus more on the quality of the entrepreneur and the opportunity. If six consumer companies come up out of 10 in consumer, so be it, as long as we believe it fits our criteria of what we want to invest in.
That was very interesting to hear. So, building upon around founders only. So, you are known for having a people first investment philosophy, that the belief that great entrepreneurs ultimately build great businesses. But at early stage, when data is limited, and like, how do you actually evaluate or measure founder quality during the due diligence process, I would say?
Yeah, that's a fair question, for sure. I think for us, it's all about art rather than science, right? Because it's coming in so early. It's more about the quality of the founding team, how they complement each other, have they worked together with each other. Obviously, they can complement each other, but if they work together, they know each other from before. They know their strengths and weaknesses, how they're thinking about the business, clarity of thought, etc. Timing. These are much more important factors than anything else in the early days. There are many more, but I won't bore you. But let's say we look at the traits of founders. One of the traits we look at is grit, determination. The second, but maybe even more important, is someone who's very conscientious. So the data shows that conscientious people are the most successful. They commit something, they do it. I will do it means I will figure out a way to get it done. I will say I'm going to move to the US to build this business, and then 6 years later they're still saying, "Oh, but my family member or auntie." No, I committed it for the best of the business. I need to sacrifice. I will go as I committed to you, the investor, and to my other shareholders. So that's the kind of the founders we like.
Okay. So, one more thing I wanted to ask, like, do you rely more on intuition when evaluating founders, or just this structured approach that you just discussed?
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah, it has to be structured, but at the end of the day, you got to have a sixth sense on these teams. So we spend a lot of time with them, call them to our Bangalore office, spend time with them, have lunch, coffee, etc. As much as we can, because we don't have months and months for diligence on this stuff. So intuition also matters. But it's a fair question.
Yeah, so is there any particular strategy that you use to like know more about the founding team dynamics in that evaluation, like when you are choosing the right
Yeah,
founders?
we do extensive DD. We call as many people as we can. So each founder we will call 10, 12, so let's say references at least to figure out what they say. It could be the seventh reference, the eighth reference that unfortunately comes out negative. And then we know that we have to be careful here and maybe drop out of this transaction because that's all we have, right? That reference. Because after that, we're going to partner with him or for many, many years. So we have to be extra careful that we get into bed with the right founders.
That was interesting to hear.
So venture capital often requires investors to, support founders through both good times as well as the difficult ones. So, what does it truly mean to be an all-weather partner to a startup, particularly when they're navigating down rounds or strategic pivots?
I think we are known for that. If you see across our history, we have several companies that almost died, but we supported them through that very tough period. Because having come from a family of entrepreneurs, being an entrepreneur myself, I know there's no straight line in success in entrepreneurship, right? There's going to be lots of down days and many down months and down years. But as long as the founder or founding team has the grit and determination to come through it, and they're building the business in the right way, we're happy to help in those tough times. Whether it be giving a bridge loan, whether it be supporting by just being there for them, whether it be helping them with recruitment at that point in time, and it's even harder for them to get anyone, let alone a star person to join. Whatever it takes, maybe talking to other investors to try
So,
to convince them
Sasha,
to come into the
Jetwork has
round,
become one of the
whatever it
standout
takes for them to
companies
get
in
through
your
those tough
portfolio.
times,
Could you
to
walk
come
us
out
through the
stronger,
financial logic
is what
behind
our job is all
supporting their
about.
pivot from their original business model?
I mean, there are
Yeah,
many
yeah,
examples
of
I can give,
course.
but
I mean,
that's
we
where
started
we
with
are
a
right now.
capital light model.
In network. But we realized that the pain point is actually way bigger than we thought. And for that to happen and go after a larger TAM, we needed to change the business model. So we moved from a asset light model to I'd say a little bit more asset heavy, not as asset heavy as people think, because the whole idea is that we are a marketplace. We want to be efficient around that. And that's the reason is that we realize that, my God, and this is not just bound to one sector or one category, but this can go across multiple categories. The pain point is similar in different ways. And that's the reason the company has grown so exponentially over the years, is the ability, flexibility, and agility of Srinath and Amrit to realize this, convince investors to give them capital and continue to grow. And that's done phenomenally well. For example, even markets, they were primarily an Indian company, right? But they realized that, hold on, this can clearly be a US pain point as well. And today, one third of our revenues come from the US. So they did a remarkable job of really fast execution. And they've made mistakes along the way, but they're correcting themselves as well very quickly and move forward.
So, to follow up on this regarding the whole pivot we see which industries or businesses do. So, as an early stage investor, how do you evaluate whether a pivot is a sign of strategic evolution or a red flag about the original thesis the business is following?
I think basically pivot is just facing reality. You start a business and then after a while you realize that, hold on, what's going on here? Let's say when I funded this young company in 2008, we were doing, online, let's say it was an online business for gifting, if I remember the initial business model. And and it was us, and then Tiger Global had come into the cap table as well. But what happened is once Tiger came in, we realized that the TAM that they were going after was too small. And we explained to the CEO why we thought the TAM should be, we should go after a bigger TAM, because otherwise the end up business being much smaller. The founder was exceptional. He was given a ticket to go to Brazil and to go to, I think, Beijing by Lee Fixel from Tiger Global. He went in 2 trips, 1 day each or 2 days each at best. Came back and realized, my God, I can build a much bigger business here. So his agility and his willing to listen was the reason he created a new business, and the new business became Mintra. And as you know, Mintra has been phenomenally successful as an online apparel player. And what we were showing him is that, look, online apparel is really taken off in markets like Brazil and China. And why not India? And you're well placed to do this. And he managed to pivot it and execute on that, obviously, and built a business that is eventually sold to Flipkart, as you know. And today, Mintra is a multi-billion-dollar business. Yeah, and that founder was obviously Mukesh Bansal.
Sasha, from your experience, like what are some of the most common financial mistakes that founders usually commit, like when scaling a company, let's say from $1 million in revenue to $100 million in revenue?
I think, sometimes scaling too fast, getting too excited about raising money and scaling too fast, not keeping an eye on the unit economics, uh, running out of cash, not keeping a close eye on cash. When companies are small, the cash can get over very fast. And then suddenly you kind of wait to the last minute and you feel, okay, I should be able to raise the next round of capital. But that takes time sometimes. The market could, for example, let's say the company is running out of, in 2 months, running out of cash and they want to raise money tomorrow morning. And now in the next 2 months, with this Iran-US war going on, which no one had really predicted, suddenly what do? Maybe people don't feel like writing a check right now. Maybe they do. I'm just giving an example of, let's say there's a negativity in the market. So there's no fault of the entrepreneur. The company is in good shape, but the round may take 6 months. Now what do? Unless your existing investors are willing to give you a bridge, suddenly you're out of cash and a very promising business is dead, right?
Yeah.
So it's always good to try to keep. Now it's easier said than done and very bookish to say keep 9 months, and And the reality on the ground is much easier than, much harder than what I'm saying on a podcast. But that's the way it is. To try to keep that financial discipline that, okay, now I have, let's say, 9 months of cash or 12 months of cash. Now itself, start looking for capital. It takes 6 months minimum, even in a good scenario. And 3 months, you got to keep as a buffer. So it's best to start when you don't need it versus starting when you need it. Because when you need it, then the world may not be available for you.
Exactly. That was insightful.
Yeah, so just had a follow up on this. We see many quick commerce companies, raising funds like crazy, even though there isn't really the amount of profitability that we would like to see for these industries. So, at what stage of valuation should founders really, begin pivoting their focus from aggressive growth towards profitability?
These are hard to answer question, and it's horses for courses. But first, you have to obviously get to, PMF, right? Without PMF, you don't have a business. Once you get to PMF, at least you know that, okay, there's a real product and there's real need for my product or service, in most cases product, and now I can start pressing the pedal to the metal and scaling this faster. As you evolve, you may need different versions of PMF. It's not just one time done and you're over, right? Because you move into different ICPs, different customers, etc., etc. And then, of course, if you get big enough and you want to go IPO, you know the markets in India. You need to be profitable, or at least a clear path to profitability. Otherwise, the Indian public markets don't accept you very warmly. So smart entrepreneurs realize that, and they realize that good time to start moving towards profitability. Now, if you wait too long, then it becomes harder. So when you go into the public markets, you are building your business in front of millions of retail investors, which makes it much harder for you. And they're not as forgiving as private equity or venture capitalists are in private rooms. Therefore, I believe that sometimes it's okay to delay the IPO, but tighten your act before you get to the main board and list your business so that life is much more seamless and better for you, because you'll have other complications and other requirements in a public market business. And if you add up the profitability part to it as well, it just adds pressure to the entrepreneur. And some people disregard that. They feel that they can figure it out when they launch, but it's hard. So it's best you do it well before you go IPO, so that when you do launch, you're already in a good space.
So, moving on, my question is, like, if you were starting a new fund today, let's say of $10 million, so which sectors or niches in Indian economy would you be most excited to invest in?
Good question. Let me think. Mm, $10 million fund, you said, right?
Yes.
Uh, I would say at the end of the day, you know, for us, we've been looking at sectors across the board. And if I had to look at a 10 million fund, first of all, 10 will be a little bit small even for me who have been recommending small funds. But if I was insisting that we do a 10 million fund, I would say I think AI is the way to go, right? At this stage. So AI fund 10 million bucks, because you can put small checks into these companies, and the upside is huge, very binary. So as long as your investors are comfortable taking the binary risks, AI Indian companies building for the US markets would be a consumer internet AI companies would be very exciting.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, time will tell, but that's what it is. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Sasha have also served on the board of Nazara Technologies. So, from that vantage point, so how do you see the public market's appetite for Indian technology companies evolving today? Although we see this AI race in the US, do think similarly for the Indian markets?
See, at legacy companies, Akash, governance is already institutionalized. Process, committees, compliance is already in place in companies in Nazara, right? In a startup, you're building governance as you scale. The goal is strong controls and transparency without killing the speed. So it's like you're building into becoming the next Nazara. That's how it works.
All right. So regarding valuation expectations from a private market perspective and a public market perspective, so they are quite really different what we see in India as of now. So do you think they will align in some time, or what's the timeline on that when we see these alignment of valuations from the private market and a public market perspective?
It's hard because us private market investors are always more let's say, we are much more optimistic, right? And therefore, you'll see the valuations always run up in most cases. And then when we list, you come right back to reality. There's so many companies like that. Public markets are far more unforgiving, far more skeptical, etc. So it's generally you see this thumb rule that private markets are always running ahead of public markets. It's easy to say they'll catch up, but they can only catch up when the bubble bursts, and then for a period of time they in fact go down. Then again, some new sexy sector comes up, clean tech or AI or what have you, and then we are back to the party again. So this is age-old human behavior. I don't see it changing because my whole career we have seen so many waves of excitement, and today it's AI. It'll probably go on for a while, and then something else will come. So we're back to square one again. And it's hard to stop private market investors from getting excited. I guess that's our personality. That's why we're in this business.
One thing I want to know from your experience, like over the years, you have worked closely with many founders. So, can you just share one particularly challenging situation you faced with a founder and like how it was ultimately resolved?
Yeah, I think in the case of Fractal Analytics, which was my first investment, uh, there was five equal founders, or six if I remember, but there was no CEO, and it, we were just board members, of course, like any of our other companies. But at some point, we realized that look, there was a bit of strategic drift because all of them were equally smart, had different skill sets, etc. But if you don't have one person saying, "Okay, let me take the final decision after taking everyone's opinion," it becomes hard to move forward, right? Because then it becomes one step forward, two steps backwards. So I did request them to find a way to pick one CEO among themselves, but it was hard for them. They tried, to be fair to them. They did try. They did go through a process, but they were just not able to do it. So then I said, okay, guys, if you don't mind, I will take the decision because otherwise we all will suffer and the company will not progress. And that's when I picked Shrikant and Pranay to be the co-CEOs of the company. And that turned out to be a very good decision. You can see how well the company is done. And so that was a challenging period for me because I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I had equal respect for all the founders. They'd done very well, very good people. But at some point, for the betterment of the company, we had to pick. And I believe Shrikant and Pranay would be a very good candidates to drive forward this business. And that was as early as 2008. And you can see how well they've done as co-founders of this business. They were unleashed. It was their own company, but now they could actually take decisions and move forward. And of course, they can make mistakes and have made mistakes, but it happens in every single company. But they made obviously far more better decisions than and less mistakes, and that's how the business has done extremely well over the last so many years.
Yes, this was very insightful that how timely decision making is important.
Yeah.
So what we are currently like seeing in the private credit markets in the US, like quite a lot of redemptions happening from the AI funds regarding the AI again fear, the job opportunity fear, the US or the West is facing. So as someone who has seen multiple market cycles and given the current scenario, what is happening? So what is your golden rule for surviving a capital scarce environment actually?
Frankly, there's no golden rule. Just don't be greedy. Just don't be greedy and know what you're doing, have knowledge, understand what you're getting into, do your own diligence, don't get too excited or don't get too scared, and be moderate about anything. Once you have knowledge and confidence, then you should be fine. And don't be greedy because what happens is that a lot of times, like let's say the dot com people got greedy and most of the business had made no sense, right? And you were still on paper making tens of millions of dollars. And people said, now we're going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. Eventually, they made nothing, right? Two companies came out of the whole dot com era, which was Amazon and Make My Trip, right, as an example. So, my point is just relax, do some diligence, don't think you're too smart, or most people are over smart. Smart people become over smart, and then there's recipe for disaster. And don't be greedy, please, right? Nothing comes free and easy in life. So if you can follow that rule, you'll be fine.
Yeah, one more curious question. So you were inducted into the Hall of Fame as an outstanding angel investor. So what is one investment you passed on that still haunts you?
There are too many. I can name 20 investments that we passed on, or
Like we
not
would
20.
love to hear the best, the top of them.
let's say Misho, they pitched to us. We loved them. And it was just one pitch, and we were happy to continue doing diligence. But what happened is that somebody else moved faster than us, and before we could go to the next stage of diligence, they had closed it. So we hadn't given them an offer, but it was so good the pitch that we were ready to move to IC that week itself, as an example. Or let's say when Zepto came to us, they were Kirana cart. We were not sure that we didn't like that business model, but the founder was super articulate, and there was something special about Adit. And so me and my partner discussed till the last second, should we just give him some money because he's a world-class entrepreneur? At the beginning of this podcast, I said, right, it's all about entrepreneurs. So our thesis was, okay, we can't understand the business because it's just, we don't believe in the business. And we were right. Kirana card became Zepto. It didn't remain Kirana card. But believe in the founder. But we went against our own thesis and did not give Aditya any money, which is stupid, right? Because I'm giving you all this lecture for the last 30 minutes, but I didn't practice what I preached. So that's a good example in Zepto. And then maybe 20 more unicorns I can name where we came close to writing checks, but for a variety of different reasons, we didn't do it.
That was really interesting to hear.
So, how do you really assess the risk of a valuation bubble today compared to the funding frenzy we saw as in 2021?
See, the biggest difference is discipline. In 21, capital was abundant, valuations ran ahead of the fundamentals. Today, founders and entrepreneurs are more grounded. Of course, a bulk of the value is really going in the big seven, as you can imagine. The rest of the companies in the US really haven't really grown that much. So, again, don't get greedy, relax, don't put all your eggs in one basket. The reality is that I believe AI will have a lot of eventual bust up, but eventually you'll have some very large outcomes out of AI companies. Like the ones who survive will become ginormous companies. There'll be some huge failures. Lots of small companies are going to die. But believe me, if you're lucky enough to be part of some of the bigger companies, and some have already proven to be big companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, etc., but there are many more coming up. And therefore, you're going to make huge money, while you're also going to lose a lot of money. So therefore, this is not a sector or category that you can stay out of. It's going to be a life and game changer. So we all have to be in the party. On the other hand, a lot more usage is not happening in AI. You need to use it more, and therefore that use case has not been thrown out yet. Where corporates are not using it anywhere near where they should be, or at least the markets are saying they should use, and that's where the market caps run up. But a lot of small use cases have already started happening. That itself is very, very, very powerful and very good for productivity. So you will see a lot of value add by just small stuff, AI assistance, basic stuff. That itself is already going to work and has worked. So overall, I'm much more excited about this let's say this phase. Will the bubble burst? Obviously, it will burst. It's a matter of time, right? It will burst, like any other bubble I mentioned. You just have to be careful that, as the famous Chuck Prince saying, right? You got to keep dancing and don't make sure that you sit. You got a chair to sit on, right? When the whole thing crashes, easier said than done. So time will tell.
So, sir, moving on, we would love to hear like how do you keep your investment thesis from becoming stagnant after spending more than a decade in venture capital?
Ah, mm. How do you keep yourself? I think this is more about, it's all about just being on top of things, being curious, reading a lot. I read 24/7, constantly talking to new entrepreneurs to figure out what's coming. See, our job is very exciting and very hard. It's exciting because we have the right to predict the future, which, as you can imagine, is almost impossible because we're not gods. But it's exciting because if you can get some pathway to the future and it comes even remotely close, it's very gratifying. Obviously, the entrepreneur is going to go out and execute and go get that done. He or she gets the glory for that, rightfully so. But our job is, can we figure that out in the future and see where is the trend lines of the world going? Where is the pattern going? So that's what we keep doing. Most times we get it wrong because this is super hard. Then one time we get it right, it's a huge, huge opportunity and really pays off for all our losses.
Absolutely, sir.
But you have to be on it continuously. And it's like it's like we call it early signals, where it's like a radio transparency. You can barely hear the rest of the humans can't hear it, but our job is to say, oh shit, I can get it. This is where the future is going. The early signals, as we call it. The early signals is critical for us. And so we have to invest at that time in the early signals when everyone is skeptical and laughing at us saying, why the hell are you investing in this? It's like a head scratcher, right? Like, hey, why did I do that? Like, what does that make any sense? When you hear that, That's music to our ears. That means most people have not understood it, and therefore we have a chance to get in early into something that is very exciting. That's like Fractal doing AI or data mining in 2000. It was like a head scratcher, right? Like, why would anyone do AI right now? But the rest is history.
Yeah, that's exactly what you just said. They're just more of an art than a structured framework.
That's right. And it's all about catching those early signals. That is the critical part of our business.
So finally, a lot of finance students today, as well, are really interested in getting into venture capital. So from your perspective, what's the best path to get there? Would you recommend starting in areas like investment banking, working in startup operations, or trying to build a company of yourself before moving into this field?
See, of course, there's no best path because I've seen some amazing VC friends of mine who've never done a day of operating work in their lives. They've gone to a McKinsey or a Bain, but they're very clear thinking, they have first principles, clarity of thought. They know how to think through business challenges and business opportunities and then go and find. So they've done very well. On the other hand, I like young people to go and get their hands dirty for two reasons. One is you actually go and work in a startup, you can see what's really happening, how hard it is. So you get empathy for the founders instead of sitting in your AC cabin and giving a lecture as a 25-year-old to another 25-year-old who's actually out there in the sun, right? And really pushing them to see at the ground level, even selling one small product is so hard. And what they do right, you can also learn. So you can also maybe meet co-founders. So it's priceless to go and work in an operating company. If you have an idea of your own which makes sense, not just for the sake of it, then nothing like it. You can do your own company. Or go and work in a large company which is scaling fast. You also see what the hell is happening there, what do they do right, etc. So I prefer that model. But like I said, there's horses for courses. There are enough and more success stories on the other side where people have worked in consulting or come straight out of college and said, look, I'm clear. I've gone through internships and I think VC's for me and I'm clear that I want to become a venture capitalist. And fair enough, let them do what they have to do. So, unfortunately for any young viewer, there's no specific advice. Do what your heart tells you, and if you really want it, you'll get it here. But remember, VC is considered for some reason VC's industry is very sexy, but it's not as sexy as you think when you come into our door, right? It's hard work, and it's hard to predict the future and see these early signals and run around and fight 10 other funds to get access to a hot deal. But if you're willing to do that and you're willing to out hustle anyone else and outwork anyone else, you could be in any fund and you'll do very well. So the good thing about the democracy of venture capital is you could be in a tier F fund, but if you can be that one who moves his ass or her ass and gets in front of the best entrepreneur and gets the deal for your fund, suddenly you have transformed that fund into becoming a top tier firm. And it's all credit to you. You did it. Let's say in 2008, or which I forgot which year now, maybe 2008, there was a young analyst in Excel, or maybe 2001, who pushed the senior partnership at Excel in the US to do Facebook, right? And the rest is history. Excel came from being an average fund to today being one of the best funds in the world. But there's one young analyst who pushed his boss to looking at Facebook and pushing him to consider investment, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's a really valuable perspective, and I would say a great note for us to wrap up. Sir, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and insights with us. So, your journey from building companies and angel networks to backing some of India's most promising startups offers a fascinating look at how venture capital really works behind the scenes. So, and to everyone listening, today's conversation is a reminder that a successful venture investing isn't just about capital; it's about conviction and long-term thinking as well. So, thank you for tuning in to Vantage by D Street. We will see you in the next episode.